Welcome to our regular session meeting. We will have the moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Henderson.
Please face the flag and join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Board of Education's July 14th regular session meeting. Student Representative Raymond Jen is currently participating in a math competition, and he will not be in attendance this evening, but we wish him all the best in his competition. Ms. Babb is out of town, and I think Mr. McMillan will be joining us shortly. A reminder to the board members that our next policy review meeting will be held on Wednesday, July 21st at 1:30 p.m. in the Andrew Johnson boardroom. The Joint Education Committee is also scheduled to meet on Wednesday, July 21st at 4 p.m. in the Andrew Johnson Building boardroom. Board members, you received an email yesterday regarding the addition of item 6C17, which is a request from Farragut High School to approve an agreement for their use of Project Lead the Way curriculum and services. If there are questions or discussion, they can be entertained prior to our vote on the consent agenda items. And please note that there is a new version of that contract attached to your agenda. Are there any other requested changes to this agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to approve? We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now I'd like to refer to Superintendent Thomas for a special recognition.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This activity is one that I have the most fun with every time we do it, just recognizing the members of our outstanding family that do outstanding things for our students. So we know that when students are hungry, it's much harder to learn. Tonight, I want to recognize a group of people who work very hard to eliminate this obstacle for our students. The organization No Kid Hungry Tennessee has recently highlighted the KCS nutrition team for their work, including the presentation of a school meal hero plaque. Our Executive Director of School Nutrition, Brett Foster, has invited several of our school nutrition team members to join us tonight, so I would ask that Brett and her team come forward at this time. If you would, make your way to up front here. Don't hesitate. Come on down. Okay, as they make their way to the stage, I do want to briefly point out that our nutrition workers do an outstanding job every year providing breakfast and lunch meals to students. But in the last 18 months, they have gone far beyond the call of duty. In the spring of 2020, they organized a drive-through meal service, and these meals were an essential resource for many families during the early weeks of the pandemic. More recently, they reorganized our meal process to reflect new health and safety procedures for in-person students and to provide meals for virtual students during the 2021 school year. And during our summer learning camps that just ended, our team continued to provide bagged meals that could be distributed to our campsites. Like all of us, I'm sure that Brett and her team are looking forward to a more normal school year this fall. And I'm confident that one thing will not change, and that's the dedication, skill, and compassion of our nutrition workers will continue to be an enormous blessing to our students and our families. Please join me in recognizing our outstanding school nutrition team. Board members, if you would join up, we'll take a group picture.
Thank you all so much for being here this evening and for all your hard work over the past year plus. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. It's fun to be able to recognize a great group of people. Okay, and Ms. Coatney will have the reading of the agenda items, please.
Madam Chair, before we read consent agenda, we have 3 public forum speakers that have registered to speak to item 6C3. The first speaker is Kevin Hill. And Mr. Hill, just a reminder that you have 5 minutes to speak, and please state your name and county of residence for the record before you start. Thank you.
Kevin Hill, Knox County. I know that you all have on your agenda tonight to consider a memorandum of agreement with the Knox County Health Department so that Dr. Buchanan would serve as the supervising physician for the nurses in Knox County. I also know that that has been historically a soft agreement without any formal paperwork. I would encourage you to postpone that decision. You have, that was a request by the county official. It's not been approved by her supervising body, the county commission, which will happen this coming week. If it was something that she needed to be formalized before school begins, then it would have needed to have been formalized before the previous year's school years began. So the argument that it should happen before school begins is moot and irrelevant. However, we do have a problem with an official who's currently her department's currently under audit for misappropriation of funds or resources. We also have an individual who has proven herself to be more and more out of step with what the science suggests regarding children. She stood here a few months ago and was in direct conflict with an expert you called in, Dr. Childs, who clearly contradicted her advice to you. Why would you invite her back as a supervising physician to continue giving advice when she's actually her expertise, since she's not been a practicing physician for a long time, but her expertise is on the extreme end. She was a geriatric physician prior to being an administrator. So why not bring in someone like Dr. Childs or put out and request one of the many hospital pediatric groups that are apart from Children's Hospital to serve in this capacity? There's questions as to whether, and you all would have to, I think we would like to hear you quote, because we've looked for where there is a law, and you all have said there is, so I assume there is. We just would like you to inform us, where there's a law that actually requires a direct physician over the nurses rather than simply them serving the capacity that they serve as nurses that has some independence under their licensure, under the supervision of the child's own physician. How the child's own physician doesn't satisfy that requirement if they're acting on the directions of serving medication and things like that that the child's physician has prescribed for them. So we would appreciate you making that, because we've not found it, doesn't mean it's not there. We're just not, those of us who've been looking haven't found where there is a legal requirement for that. So just as a sincere ask, please share that with us tonight so that we can understand that regulation better. But the main point is there's no reason, if for years past we've not needed a formal memorandum of agreement and it's been perfectly satisfactory, then I can't imagine why for school to start we need one now. And it would be wise to wait and see what the county does next week in response. And I think it should be appropriate for anyone reviewing her as a potential supervisor over any program that while her department is currently under an investigation that, quite frankly, while we don't have hard evidence of it now, until we know, doesn't rule out the possibility of criminal violations, until that's completed, she shouldn't have any additional new responsibilities extended to her in any kind of formalized agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Sherry Garrett. If you'll just state your name and county of residence, please.
Sorry. My name is Sherry Garrett. I live in Knox County. I was very concerned when I saw that there was supposed to be an appointment of a medical director of Dr. Martha Buchanan as the medical director over the Knox County Schools. Dr. Buchanan has had a family practice past, but that has been many years ago since she has served in her capacity as the health department director and as public health officer in Knox County. She does not have the pediatric background. She does not have, in my understanding, the certification that many family practice physicians have to obtain in order to see pediatric patients. Knox County schools do not have adults attending their schools. They have children. And children have special needs, different needs other than what adults have. I've been a nurse for most of the last 30 years, and in my practice, or in my positions, both in the hospital, in doctor's offices, and in long-term care facilities, we have practiced autonomously with a doctor's order. These children come in with medications they need to have per their physicians, their pediatrician's orders. If a child is, for example, paralyzed and needs to be catheterized, that comes with their doctor's orders. And these nurses perform these tests and have been doing it for many years in Knox County schools. I don't feel that Dr. Buchanan is the appropriate person to be heading this. I would highly recommend that you look at other positions, other physicians, pediatricians in this capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mr. Vernon Henry.
Good afternoon. Vernon Henry, Knox County. First time I've been before the Board of Education. Your job's to oversee the education of our children. And yet the very job that you've been put in charge of, you seem to be wanting. You're going to put an individual, as others have said, who's under investigation for whatever the case may be at this point in time. We're still waiting to find out what those charges are. This is not a rhetorical question. Has anybody on this board at all vetted this individual that you want to put in charge of Knox County's children? Anybody? Raise a hand.
Mr. Henry, this is not a back and forth.
I know it's not,
Thank you.
but raising a hand is a real simple aspect. So the reality is I don't think anybody's vetted her. The individual's care for handling Knox County has been questionable at best. And now we want her to oversee our children. I would ask you to push this vote to the wayside until you can basically vet this individual or other individuals who are more appropriate for the position. Because after all, the very, very people you have been elected to take care of are indeed your responsibility. You put the parents in a precarious situation because you put them at odds with the Knox County Health Department. This woman has a history of not knowing the difference between science fiction and science fact. I brought those up. Many of us in our group have actually brought that up. I'd like you to take a look at it as well. Before you bring somebody in, please vet them. Because at the end of the day, this is our future. These are Knox County's children. And it's your job to make sure that, in fact, you are ensuring you have the best to look after these kids. With that, I will relinquish my time. Good day.
Thank you, and that concludes public forum. Mr. Dubler, would you mind just reviewing the code that requires us to have a medical director over our nurses before we move forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking for that. I had mentioned that at the work session. There was at least one section, and I don't seem to. I was looking for it in my materials tonight, so I don't seem to find it. But I can certainly supplement with something more comprehensive. But I mean, I had personally looked at one section that talked about needing a medical director, especially for an organization like Knox County Schools. Now, as to the rest of the comments, I can't speak to.
Thank you. Yeah, we did cover that, I know, 2 weeks ago when we were here. Okay, thank you, Ms. Coatney.
Item 6, consent agenda.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
If somebody, yes. So we have a motion to pull this item off consent. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, discussion, I'm sorry, Ms. Henderson? Just to move it. Are you in agreement with moving it? Okay, okay, so all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we'll move that to the end. Would that be appropriate, to the very end? Okay. All right, so do we have a motion to, can I just ask for a motion for the consent? Do we have a, for the balance of consent? Okay. Mr. Watson made a motion. Do we have a second? I have a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7A, approve receipt of Tennessee Department of Education Remote Learning Technology Grant in the amount of $2,776,733.50, designated to technology purchases dated between March 1, 2020 and September 15, 2020.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve receipt of comprehensive state literacy development grant from the U.S. Department of Education in the total amount of $415,000, designated to participation in the Tennessee Department of Education's Literacy Implementation Network as part of the state's Reading 360 initiative.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7C, approve memorandum of understanding with the Tennessee Department of Education for the Coordinated School Health Initiative for fiscal year 2022 and receipt of grant funds in the amount of $185,000 with required matching funds in the amount of $15,000.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7D, approve receipt of Tennessee Department of Education Turnaround Action Grant in the amount of $115,267.50 for Sarah Moore Green Magnet Academy, designated to implementation of evidence-based strategies and interventions focused on proven levers of change to facilitate rapid school turnaround.
We have a motion by Ms. Satterfield, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7E, approve memoranda of understanding with Boys and Girls Clubs of the Tennessee Valley for receipt of up to $600,000 in funding from a 2021-2022 21st Century Community Learning Center grant to be used for time card processing, flagging students in the Aspen system, and salaries, taxes, and wages of part-time tutors at Carter, Dogwood, Lonsdale, Norwood, South Knoxville, West Haven, and West Hills Elementary Schools.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7F, approve memorandum of understanding with the Knox County, go on to 7G, approve Battelle Education TSIN STEMX STEM Classroom Grant sponsored by TBA and BBI in the amount of $5,000 for Bearden Middle School, designated to the purchase of a VEX Robotics IQ classroom bundle as outlined in grant proposal.
And we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Approve memorandum of understanding with the Knox County Health Department for provision of the in-school health program and grant funds up to $525,051 for the term of July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8A, approve contract with the Chrisman Company for the construction of a new Northwest Sector Elementary School at a cost of $24,220,250 using capital plan funds.
We have a motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Bounds. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8B, approve contract with Certica Solutions Incorporated through a cooperative purchasing agreement from the City of Kingsport for a customized benchmark assessment program for the term of July 1, 2021 through September 15, 2025, at a cost of $675,745 using ESSER 2.0 grant funds.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9A, approve fiscal year 2022 Knox County Schools differentiated pay plan.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And Madam Chair, I believe we have a public forum speaker on item 9B.
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Reginald Jackson. State your name and county of residence, please.
Reginald Jackson, Knox County. As I look at the agreement that y'all have put before us, nothing's changed. You didn't have any community input on it. It's the same agreement when I was in school security. There's nothing changed in this agreement. But I can tell you what has not changed is that school security has still failed their job. And as the board and school officials, y'all still sitting in the same seats after failure, bus accident, deaths. Young lady hangs herself and gives, still in position. Shooting of Anthony Thompson Jr., you're still sitting in your position. I find a problem with that. You tell me you care, but it looks like to me that you don't care. I wrote emails, I've had meetings, and you don't care. Because if you cared, you would show a little more understanding to the families that are losing their loved ones. Now, the only reason that you're getting a new security chief is because your lawsuits fell through. That's the only reason you're getting a new school security chief. Otherwise, you'll kept Gus until December when he decided he was going to leave. The man came from racism. He is racism. KPD is
Point of
still
order,
racism.
Madam Chair.
Excuse me, we cannot talk about people in public forum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we won't talk about him. That's fine. That's fine. We don't want to talk about what's really here. We don't want to talk about the problems that we're really having. Because right now, we're the one losing. We lost 6 children in a matter of 4 months because school security didn't want to show up. KPD's upset because they saying, listen, we got to show up because school security not doing their work, and then we get blamed for their job that we have to do. That is crazy. Now, I'm a man of understanding. I'm a man of trying to talk it out. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to holler. But we're going into another school year. And the still chief of security, I didn't say no name, is still here. And it's still going to pick more officers that don't want blacks in the first place. 45 gone. So you think I'm going to tell some of my people in the community, go apply and go get on there if you're going to waste your time and not be hired? That's what's going on. You said we want you to trust us, but you won't even sit down with us to talk to us about what's going on. We're not saying that we don't want our school being secure. We do. But your school security should be so strengthened and so with the right people and the right personnel that you don't need the sheriff department in there. You don't need KP in there, but because you have them in there, it's because school security ain't really ready for what's going to happen. Never have been ready. I train with them. They not ready for what might happen in the school. The officer that you had ran and left that boy in the bathroom and knew he was in the bathroom the whole day. But we blame the principals. But we didn't put the blame where it is. My kids go to Selmore Green. 1 hour and 30 minutes it took for KP to show up. School security should have been the first one there. That's why they got the cars and the lights for to show up. I shouldn't get a call at my house, where you at, because this is going on. I had to go buy my kids a $249 backpack, a bulletproof backpack to put on just in case something happens. I come to the board, I come to the school officials, they haven't called me back on, let's talk about this backpack and see what you do. We have a Secret Service agent that said, I will come down and show the backpack, show you how you can get it for half the cost. I didn't get no call back. They don't care. Sometimes I don't think it's not you don't care. Sometimes I don't think it's not racism. I think what it is you the one, some of y'all are 1%ers and y'all don't care because it doesn't happen to you. I live in Holston Hills. I'm almost out of my time. I live in Holston Hills, up on top of the hill. And I stay more in the inner city than I stay at home. My wife gets on me all the time because I stay more down here trying to fix the problems because you won't. I said I was retiring. I'm not retiring. I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to keep calling. I'm going to keep emailing until you hear us. We need a community forum about this memorandum before we approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9B, approve memorandum of agreement with the Knoxville Police Department regarding roles and responsibilities for maintaining safe schools.
Sorry, Madam Chair. We have other speakers, and I'm not sure if they may be signed up for just the public forum. No?
No, we only have one other person signed up to speak about ESSER funding.
Okay. Can we check on this real quick?
Yes, we had someone call the board office today and say that they may come to the meeting early and sign up this afternoon, but they did not come to the meeting
Okay.
before we started.
Okay, hold on.
Excuse me, our policy is that you can call till 4 o'clock the day prior to the meeting or arrive prior to our meeting and sign up, and we don't have anybody else that signed up.
So, Madam Chair,
Excuse me.
if I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules because they're students and they were here at the time, but they probably didn't know the process itself. So I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules just to hear them on the aspect.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, do we have, so we have what, about 8 or 9
No,
students? or-
Kanaya, how many students do you have? Four. Okay, we have four.
Okay.
Thank
okay.
you, Madam Chair.
All right, go ahead and come on up, please. If you'll just state your name and county of residence.
Chloe Pearson, Knox County.
Okay,
It's been exactly 3 months since the killing of Anthony Thompson Jr., 3 months that a mother has gone without her child, 3 months that siblings have gone without their brother, and 3 months that friends have gone without somebody very dear to them. Why has no justice been served when everything you have to build a case was put in the body cam footage? Y'all want to constantly throw out that Ant had a gun, but have yet to investigate why he had one, why he went to go get one, why he felt unprotected without it. This was a young man who lost an uncle to gun violence, and not to mention a close friend when he was only 12 or 13. Also, let's not forget about how months prior to his killing, he lost multiple classmates to gun violence. So let me ask y'all this. Why do these kids feel not protected enough by KPD that they take matters into their own hands? Why are these kids more scared of the police than each other? Why did y'all think that it was okay to let those police officers into the school without even informing Anthony's mother first? There's 10 million more questions that I have, but I shouldn't have to ask because it wasn't right, and y'all know it wasn't right. But we will scream justice for Ant until something is done, and I don't care if that means screaming it into my last breath. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, next student, please. Hi, just state your name and county of residence.
Ariane Lee, Knox County. The job of a police officer is supposed to protect and serve, but on April 12, 2021, they did not do that. They killed Anthony Thomason Jr. This topic is never going to die down. And Bob Thomas, for you to ask that just means you don't have my classmates and our best interests at heart. If you did, this MOA wouldn't even be in discussion right now. The MOA is now just a paper with words written on that doesn't hold any form because on April 12, 2021, these guidelines weren't followed. So as a student at Austin East, I ask that you don't dismiss my existence, my anger, and my well-being. And when you come to visit my school, I ask that you acknowledge me and my peers as well, and require SORs and KPD to do the same. And lastly, I would like for you to know that your frustration is no more than mine.
Thank you. Next student, please. Just state your name and county of residence, please.
Sequoia Sanders, Knox County. To claim the name as a roadrunner is a really hard task. People expect you not to be an upstanding person, and not to speak up when it's time to speak up. From April 12th to now, the way things have been handled through the Knox County School Board, KPD, SROs, and Knox County Sheriff's Department are unjust. Nobody should be comfortable with being frustrated with somebody else's trauma. Bob Thomas, I'm beginning to question if you really care. Do you really have our well-being at heart? As a superintendent, you should be on the side of the students and be trying to get the students' point of view and trying to understand what happened to Anthony Thompson Jr. and the trauma that came behind it.
Thank you. Okay, we have the next student, please. Is there another student?
My name is Kanaya Hutchison in Knox County. April 12th, Anthony was killed in his school's bathroom. April 21st, just 9 days later, Bob Thomas sent us back to school with metal detectors, wands, and searches. Each officer greeted me that day, just 9 days later, with a smile on their face. Same day, Bob Thomas handed my teachers a packet that was filled with information on how to handle a mass shooting in which we didn't experience. Therapists to our class who were there for support, but none of which knew exactly what we were going through. Beginning April 12th to now, Bob Thomas, it seemed as if you never had the intentions to change things for Austinese behalf. 3 months later, you're already asking for us to move on from this, and you have yet to actually address it. No parents' meetings have been formed, no communication with you and students have been made, and no mental health issues have been advocated for through the school system. You asked us to move on like the trauma isn't still there, the tears aren't still falling, and our school as a whole isn't still affected. Associate's degree to become an officer and 6 months of training is required. That's right. Especially that's there to de-escalate a situation. But that day when Officer Scott opened that door for them to walk in on Anthony Thompson Jr., that was not put into place. And for you to only come into Austinese and stand at the entrance without having a conversation with the student makes you just as bad as the SROs, KPD, and the Knoxville Sheriff's Department. As a student at Austinese, I ask that when y'all make decisions for my classmates and I, which I am just a senior, couple years from now, a year from now, I won't be there, and people under me will still be affected. I ask that certain things change on behalf of them. I only have to deal with it for 1 more year, and then I'm off to Spelman for college. But my classmates still have to deal with it. His parents still have to deal with it, and everybody else still have to deal with it. When y'all go home at night, y'all don't have to deal with this at all, but I do. Them 4 girls over there, they do. We do. Our teachers do. Y'all didn't even acknowledge how our teachers were affected by this. Yes, in the past, Austinese has lost teachers, but this year we lost more than enough for teachers, and not just admin included. I know this year it's more admin being put in place, Most of them was at Vine with me my 8th grade year, and I loved them. From Miss White to Mr. Black to Miss Hawkins being my science 8th grade teacher. That still doesn't change what went on in my school. And Bob Thomas, you came into my school, literally walked right past me and didn't say a thing to me after everything happened. I talked to Miss White about it. She said that you wanted to speak with us. Okay, cool, but you did not take the initiative to do that or speak to any of us. In February, when Stan had died, afterwards, it was officers in our school going on 2 weeks. After that, they was gone. My classmates and I, we actually spoke at a city council meeting that was held by Constance, and we asked for metal detectors. We asked for the stuff that y'all put into place after Anthony died. If y'all would have put the stuff that we asked for in place, none of this could have happened. Anthony still could be walking in Austin East like I am my senior year. I can't do this.
Thank you. Thank you, students. Okay, do we have a motion? We have a motion first, so we can have discussion. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Satterfield. Do we have a second? We have a second by Ms. Christie, was it? Okay, we have a motion and a second, so discussion. Ms. Satterfield, you want to go first?
Yeah. The MOA that we have in place, I'll be passing on this vote, just on the strength that I understand the level of why we need it and the angst that's in the community because of how we even got here with having to create a whole new MOA due to outside parties' decisions. And so I understand that aspect, but for me, I can't vote on it because it's the same words that was on the papers in the previous MOAs. And I'm just looking for change behavior, higher expectations from Knox County schools, and people held accountable, be it in positions, be it whatever it may be, for when harm is caused to our kids in any aspect. And I know last week's board meeting was just, it was, things were said and a lot was there, but I also work with you all closely. We have other conversations, and I know that we're all just trying to figure it out. And I know you, Superintendent Thomas, is trying to figure it out as well. None of us have experienced this. I think where we have dropped the ball as a board, including myself, is that we haven't shown the compassion side of it. We've been lost in the policy and the paperwork and the procedures of it all. And that could just be the fear from wanting to talk out about it. It could be the fear from, because we are wrapped up in litigation and we can't speak about it publicly. But I just ask for us to have a level of understanding of what people are going through and experiencing. And so as much as people that were at angst about KPD being pulled out of our schools, there's just as many people with angst about them coming back into our schools. So I know everyone's hard. I know it, well, I believe I do. And I know that we're just all, how we got here is we never experienced it ourselves. And how we got to this point, it was influenced by a lot of outside parties that just kind of threw it all out of whack from my perspective, in my opinion. And so I look forward to us moving forward, learning from this experience these last couple of months. The new chief of security coming in and really taking heed regarding how we operate to make sure that our kids do feel safe in their school. And that means many different things. So I look forward to continuing to work with the board and work with you, Superintendent Thomas, to make that a reality for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to say thank you to our young ladies, our students who came out and really expressed yourself, and I appreciate the vulnerability. I can't see you right now because I'm trying to talk into the microphone, but that's what I agree with Ms. Satterfield. I think that's what's not been able to happen over the last few months, not just around the situation with Anthony and his death in that school that day, but there's been many, many parents and students over the years who have suffered traumatic events in our schools. And the intent of bringing this up back in May was for the board to have an opportunity to hear from the community in a way that it maybe hasn't heard from the community in a very proactive way. I mean, that was the intent, was to be proactive and say, hey, we want you to come to the table. The intent also was to review the entirety of the existing MOA that we have. And what's happened along the way is this board has consistently said, we need to review the MOA. I mean, I've continued to hear that. Maybe some other folks have not, but I've heard that. I've also continued to hear, we need to hear from the community. We have not come to agreement about how that needs to happen. But that's also been consistent. But what we're looking at tonight is an MOA that actually we didn't even prompt. The changes that are in this MOA, I think there's roughly 6, were prompted by KPD. I mean, Mr. Thomas, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you sat down with KPD to start discussions about how to keep them engaged, and KPD said, hey, here's some changes we want to see. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Right, and so right now, what we're looking at potentially approving is not an MOA that KCS has said or the board has said, hey, here's what we think needs to happen, here's what we believe needs to happen because of what we've heard from the community and our teachers and our administrators and all that kind of stuff. What we're hearing is from a partner, KPD, to say, hey, here's what we think needs to happen. And what they've expressed is the minimum, and they've said, even for us to stay at the table, this is what needs to happen. So just think about this for a second. We're potentially approving something that everybody agrees is the very least that should happen. At the very, very least. And maybe not everybody agrees that, but that's at least, it's kind of like enough to wet the palate to say, well, maybe I can vote for this or not. And so what I want to do tonight is try to honor the board. And again, what I've consistently heard is it does need to be reviewed, and we do need to have community input. And again, the intent was to review the entirety of the MOA, which has not happened. It's not been a proactive thing that KCS has engaged in. Superintendent Thomas, I think rightfully so, felt like, hey, I've got to have a plan to open schools and have security kind of figured out and thought through. So I want to propose a substitute motion. I want to propose, and Ms. Coatney has this for everybody so they can look at it. I want to move to approve 9B because I do think it is, the intent of it is let's move something forward, and it's not where we need to move to, but it's at least an inch. With the expectation, I'm sorry, actually, I have not the wording that I want. Can you give me that paper as well? I have my old wording. Thank you. Yeah, so move to approve item 9B with the expectation and authorization for the director of schools to work with other named entities in the MOAs. So there would be 2, if this gets approved, there would be then 2. There was one with KCSO and one with KPD. To combine the separate MOAs with Knox County Sheriff's Office and the Knoxville Police Department into one MOA, leveraging input from the community and other stakeholder groups, and present a proposed combined MOA for the board, for board approval within the next 12 months. So our first MOA with Knox County Schools and KPD and KCSO was drafted and approved in 2009. And up until this point, never have we thought it was a good precedent to have 2 separate MOAs. The only reason, again, this has been proposed isn't because KCS said, hey, it's a good idea to have 2 separate MOAs. It was done out of necessity, and KPD saying, hey, for us to stay at the table, we got to see something change, and here's the minimum of what we think needs to be changed. So this approve and authorize Bob and his team to work with those entities to get back to a unified MOA, which again, I think there can be a lot of challenges about having 2 different ones, especially as you have teachers moving across from county schools to city schools, or you have parents who have a kid with special needs in a city school, and then next year they're in a county school. I think there's all kinds of challenges with having 2 different MOAs. And again, in this proposal, there's not a process for hearing from the community, but it is saying in that agreement, as we get to that agreement, that we would hear from the community. And obviously that would need to be figured out. But I want to offer this up as a substitute motion.
Ms. Owen?
And Ms. Satterfield, you made the original motion, so is that correct? So I'm offering it as a friendly motion. So.
Okay, so we have a second. Okay. All right, did you have something, Ms. Owen?
So we are discussing the
So this is a substitute motion.
Because I appreciate this very much. It's, I think it puts in place a lot of what we need for discussion. There's one disagreement that I have. In the MOA, as it's written, it says that it will be reviewed at the end of each semester. So I would like to see this say 6 months instead of 12 months. Unless they feel that's too short.
Yeah, from a wording standpoint, I'm amenable to that. I did catch that as well. And I do think it's important for the board to note that if we do approve the MOA as is, we are agreeing to review it every 6 months, at least this one, not the one with KCSO. So I think that's important to point out.
Okay.
So is 6 months enough time? Does it need to be 12 months? Does any
Mr. Thomas or
staff have
Mr.
input on that?
Oakes, would you like to address that? So to change, she's saying to change this to within the next 6 months rather than 12 months.
Well, okay. I think we could make that work. Russ, I don't know, you want to comment on that?
I think, given where we are, more time is better than less time. Also, my understanding going into the MOA is that the 6-month review is basically an operational review between our folks and the KPD's folks about, occurrences during that particular semester or during that time period. It is not intended to be a full-blown review of every piece of the MOA. At least that was my understanding from our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Oakes.
I am okay with 12 months or 6 months, but I think this also brings out another piece of the problem with both of these MOAs is that it's not clear. And when it says review, it doesn't say an operational review. And there's so many pieces here that are like that are unclear. And in each MOA, it says that the purpose is to lay out guidelines so that everyone knows exactly what to expect. But then those guidelines don't clarify exactly what to expect. So anything that we could do to make this one item as soon as possible, I think would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the intent, the reason I brought this up as a substitute motion was not that last paragraph, but I think this needs to happen even if that paragraph was not there. I did want to just point the board to a wording issue that I have with it that I'm not going to ask for it to be changed because I think it's too laborious at this point, but I do want us to be conscious about this when we're drafting these types of documents. In point 7, under D, so D7, where it says SROs will not intercede in any incident involving a special needs student, I would really like to center students first and say things like students with special needs. Again, for some folks it feels minor, but I have the same issue when we say homeless persons and things like that. I just think we need to be really conscious in our language and making sure that we're centering the person before any characteristic that might describe that person. So again, I'm not asking for a word change. I know that would have to go back to the city and all those types of things, but I do just want to elevate that as a thing as we move forward and look at language and be really thoughtful of that. Even though it's a contractual agreement and it's not meant as a marketing piece, I still think we need to be thoughtful.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. And first, maybe if we could explain the process of how we got to the MOAs as far as who all is at the table and the back and forth between the different law departments to come to the agreements that we have gotten to. And then the other is, has anyone had any discussions with the new security chief? I'm curious about that. I mean, I'm not opposed to this. Just as a board member, I'll just say that this is already my expectation. We hire the superintendent and he hires his staff to do, a certain job. And I already have the expectation that this will be discussed with the new security chief and the different law enforcement agencies. I mean, again, I'm not opposed to this.
Excuse me. Order, please. Thank you.
I mean, I'm fine with these changes. I'm just saying, as a board member, I already have this expectation that these discussions will be had.
Excuse me. Order, please. Thank you, Ms. Christie.
So I already have that expectation that that is going to happen. Like I said, I'm fine with these changes. But, it kind of feels like we're giving him permission to do what we're paying him to do. But I understand in this situation that we need to maybe outline what we want to happen because it has become such a hot topic that I just wanted to go on the record saying that that is already what my expectations were.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Christie, I appreciate that. And this, in some ways, comes out of deference for superintendent's frustration. The last time we met, I mean, the superintendent, again, correct me if I'm wrong, expressed a fair amount of frustration about just not being clear about what is expected of him with this. And I even brought up the comment last week, or I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, or a little bit off rhythm, 2 weeks ago about if we approve this, does this shut the door? I mean, I asked that question, and I think Superintendent, you said not in your mind necessarily, that you would still be open to hearing from the community. So this is one last attempt to give the superintendent some direction to move forward when I feel like he's expressed pretty directly that he doesn't feel like he has clarity. But again, Superintendent, feel free to chime in or correct me.
That's correct, Mr. Watson, and certainly I have no issues with the amendment. It's what the board approves. I agree that 2 MOAs, it'd be better to have 1, I think, and depending on what happens this evening, talk with the sheriff about these changes too. But I think, like I said, facilitator would have been probably the better way, but hey, we'll make it work. If you approve this, then we're going to do everything. We're committed to making it one agreement. We're committed to, and I'm committed to, getting community input. If you want to just leave that up to us as to how we do it, then we'll do that, and we'll keep you informed as to how we're going to do that. And if you say, you don't want community input from your district, you know what they want, then we'll work with you individually as to what you want, but to get that community input. And I know the new chief too said something maybe about some town hall meetings and things of that nature. So I know he wants to kind of get his legs under him once he gets here and figure things out. I think he'll have some good ideas. He sat in on a meeting, with us, with the mayor. So I'm sure he's probably been keeping up with things from a distance at this point since he's coming here in the next couple of weeks and all. So I'm certainly, we're comfortable with this, and if you approve it, then that's what we'll work toward and make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be for the superintendent to begin with. Knowing that this was coming and the fact that school will begin in less than a month, and we need something in place, have you or members of your staff had conversation with the sheriff's department to find out what their expectations are?
No, it's like I said last time, a couple of weeks ago, I think, on this, and if the board approves it, that'd be my next step too, is to talk with the sheriff. But this, basically what we have is to get us back to where we were before the city pulled out, or said they were going to pull out of the MOA. So this at least gets us back to there. If board approves this, then next conversation would have with the sheriff and talk with him about those changes and see what their feeling is. But I think if you vote to approve this amendment, then that's all under review with all the agencies, sheriff's department and police department, and with us and the law department.
But if we approve this,
The sheriff still operates under the current agreement that we
right.
have.
So basically, either way, until there's one agreement reached, provided that happens, then, we would have officers, KPD officers in all the city schools.
In the middle schools and high school, secondary
Well,
schools.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
But, that, it kind of bothers me about it's a little bit vague about how you're gonna, meeting with the community and getting community input is fine. But, in the past, without getting into any individuals or personalities here, I'm just talking about historically, when the city and county, particularly in something of this nature, when I say of this nature, I'm talking about law enforcement, I'm not talking about parks or something like that. They've, either one side or the other has been, I guess for lack of a better term, rather cantankerous as far as reaching a unified agreement. And I don't know if we'll get into that here or not, but well, if you couldn't reach agreement, then do you have assurance from the city that they will leave their officers in the middle and high schools?
Well, I think my understanding is that if the board approves this, then they will, until there is a new agreement.
That wasn't what I asked.
So what are
I'm
you asking?
asking you, who did you talk to? The mayor?
Yes, talk to the mayor and Chief Thomas.
Did the two of them tell you, or did you all even discuss what would happen if the board didn't approve this, or if something happened?
No, we didn't discuss if the board didn't approve it.
So you're just basically assuming that they would continue?
Well, they again made the changes to the agreement under the conditions and changes that they made. They said they would have the officers in the school, so I have to go on, the word that I was provided by the mayor.
I understand what you're saying, but there wasn't any, it wasn't like, these are the changes that we want made and you'll have our support for the full year.
Again, I don't have that in writing. That was my understanding, though, that the officers are going to be there for this school year based on the fact that the board
Okay.
would approve this MOA.
I guess since you didn't specifically ask that, and they didn't state it, I see what you're saying, though. You would naturally assume that. I would hope that they wouldn't decide for whatever reason to remove them just because. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to Mr. McMillan's point, I think some of that is addressed in conclusion on the page 5, where the city, I think, is committing to this agreement until a new one at some point, at some time is reached. So I think they're saying, hey, if this gets approved, we're in. Also, I think the 12-month timeframe helps some. I know Ms. Babb's not here tonight, but I know she referenced at our meeting 2 weeks ago about really wanting to get the new chief involved, let him get his feet under him and all that kind of stuff, and let him be a part of whatever that community engagement process is. So I think this gives time for the new chief to be fully engaged in whatever happens moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I have a clarifying question for Mr. McMillan. Are you saying that you would like for them to have a minimum commitment of time so that they say, if we agree to this, we will stick with it for this minimum amount of time?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. That would have been my hope, in the discussion. I would have thought that it would have come up because it may not be, it may just be that they can work everything out. But somehow or another, I think that, and I might be wrong, oh bad, that getting the sheriff's department and the city, mayor and police chief, all on the same page to a common agreement, I guess I'm just a little skeptical, I guess, that's the best I could say.
Maybe we
about it.
could ask Mr. Thomas to just ask the mayor to commit for a minimum amount of time for the school year at least.
I'll be glad to talk with Mayor Kincannon about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think should this approve, that minimum time frame should be 12 months if this gets approved. And I think, Mr. McMillan, I think if this substitute motion doesn't, if it gets approved and we cannot get to a single agreement, I think all this is stating is that we're going to be that the superintendent and his team are going to be acting in good faith to try to do that. But if for some reason we can't get to an agreement, then the 2 MOAs at that point would stay in effect, correct?
That's correct. And we'll do our best to try to work with all the entities involved to come up with one agreement. So
Okay,
that's the plan.
thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, let me ask you this. Given what we've said here, what would you think about putting 9B in place for 12 months? Us calling for it to be there for 12 months, splitting it, and then doing what you want to do here, all this other stuff. Put that as if you have 9B in place, that doesn't prohibit any of this other from taking place, does it?
Mr. Watson?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to think about, I appreciate your thought process there, Mr. McMillan. And I think what I was trying to do with the intent of keeping them together is to ensure the public and to make a strong commitment from the board that we desire to get to a single MOA. My concern about separating them is if we end up approving 9B and then not approving the additions, then we're back into the same place as if we didn't have a substitute motion. So.
Well, let me tell you this, and it may not make any difference. If you'll split them so that we have 9B, now, we could always, as a board, if you have these community meetings, we could always add something back to 9B. Could we not, Mr. Dupler? If something came up that needed to be added back to the original 9B?
Go ahead, Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. So the way I understand it, and again, this MOA came from the city, but the way I understand it is their intent is that if this is approved, it will stay in effect for KPD until there's another agreement. So, however long that is, whether that's 12 months or 18 months or 6 months or whatever it is. So that's my understanding. If there's any changes to this agreement, an amendment or a wholesale change, it would have to be agreed to by not only the board, but the city as well. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking about was that we would go ahead and get 9B in operation, and it would stay in operation, as you said, until something else came back. But in the discussion with the community or with anybody else, if somebody comes up with a suggestion that would strengthen it, and the board and the city could agree on it, then we could add it back there or in the, in whatever we had coming later. But until then, we would have that in place.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan. And
What do you think about that, Dave?
So, Mr. McMillan, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to make sure I'm tracking with what you're saying. You're saying if we go ahead and approve 9B tonight as is, without the additional substitute motion, then if and when we should have any community process, or if and when somebody should come up with some better ideas that might strengthen the agreement, then we could do that at that time. Is that correct? So I think that I understand what you're saying, and I think that is true. The whole purpose in the substitute motion is to guarantee that we're going to relook at it. If we just approve 9B, then there's no guarantee that we're going to relook at it, and I don't think it gives Mr. Thomas any kind of direction about how to proceed forward. I'm not comfortable separating 9B from my substitute motion, or that part of it, because I think the approval of 9B would need to happen first, because I don't think you can make a substitute motion that affects 9B unless it's approved, right? And so my vote on 9B might look different depending on if we agree to relooking at the entire MOA. So if I separate them, then I can't, it would affect the way I voted for 9B. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you discussed personally these changes with Mayor Kincannon?
Which changes?
Adding this.
I have spoken to Mayor Kincannon, not about the wording for this resolution.
That's what I was talking about.
But I did, yeah, I didn't know that, I didn't think that would be necessarily appropriate to do, because all I'm doing is saying we're going to continue the conversation. I did speak to Mayor Kincannon about whether or not she is still willing to hear from the community, and she said yes, but I didn't. So in effect, yes, I did, but I didn't pass this wording by her. I don't typically pass wording for resolutions by
I would hope she would be willing, and I think she would be willing to hear from the community as long as she's mayor.
Yeah, and I think
I'm sure.
ultimately the question is if this board is willing to do that and make a decision to do that. So.
Thank you.
But you don't want to split them.
No, sir, because again, if I do, it'll affect the way I vote for 9B. So.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think it was Ms. Owen and then Ms. Satterfield, or?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may need the law director's help on this one. If I understand correctly, if we approve 9B separate from the substitute motion can't happen in this meeting, can it? Because it's not an agenda item. So the only way that we could have this substitute motion is if it's attached to 9B.
I would think that's true.
Well, so what would happen is, I mean, so you all at this point would need to vote on the substitute motion. And if it passes, fine. If it fails, then you would be going back to the original motion, which would simply just be to approve 9B, and that's it. Yeah.
And then so there's not a way to split this into two agenda items. My understanding is that Mr. McMillan would like to vote on these pieces separately, but since it's not part of an agenda item, it can't happen.
Well, you could, I mean, somebody could ask for a new motion. I mean, that's separate. You see what I'm saying? So if the substitute motion fails, then it goes to to 9B, and then you approve or disapprove 9B. Presumably, if it's approved, then you could bring another motion to do what Mr. Watson's talking about. But those would stand on their own at that point.
Okay, that's extremely tricky.
Yeah.
All right. I also see Mr. McMillan's concern about ensuring that it will continue for a year, because the agreement, each of our MOA agreements have a clause that say any entity can withdraw from it. It can be canceled by either party on 30 days written notice. And so I understand the concern that one party has done this once and that it could happen again. So I understand that. I feel like they have made an effort to make an agreement with us. And so I would certainly hope that that kind of willy-nilly behavior wouldn't happen. But I think that a conversation with Mr. Thomas would be all that would be necessary. I think a gentleman's agreement there would be adequate to make sure that that doesn't happen. I would like to see these two together, because if we're approving 9B, we're approving 9B. The community expects us to have some kind of review at some point, and our superintendent has said that he would like to have one document. It would be much easier to have one document. So I'm not sure. I think separating this out as some kind of separate motion is going to cause some confusion. I think having it attached here, it says, here's what we're doing, and this is contingent that we're also going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Ms. Satterfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too would like to see this combined because, like everyone has mentioned, it gives superintendent direction. As what Christy said, it is my expectation that superintendent would still get this community input with the new chief of police, but this is a public-facing document to say our commitment to making it happen. And I just want to give a perspective that, yes, we're individuals and we're elected officials and we can serve our community. We're also a part of a system. And so when we don't open or invite the community's voice in major decisions, it feels like silencing a community. And so I think that approving this part of and adding this will give that opportunity for people to share their experience. If we take the input or not, that will come down the line. But people have stories that they want to share out, good, bad, positive, and we can learn and grow from it. But I don't like us not, as a system, as a board, as a school system, shutting the door on not having community input on how we keep our kids safe and how do we make sure that they feel safe. Because if we don't allow the system to open up to include the community, then we're silencing voices. And so I would like to see this pass.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. I'm certainly not opposed to hearing from the community. I certainly want to. I've made it clear that I think we should do individual district meetings if at our town hall as a board, or as a representative for our district. So I am fine to support the memorandum. I'm thankful that the superintendent and that the chief of police and the mayor were able to come to an agreement on this for the moment. It's obvious that we're going to continue to look at it with the way the conclusion is written. But I'm uncomfortable with the community input part of this. I really want to get the new chief of police or the new chief of security in and get his feedback and get his buy-in with what we're doing before we come up with what, to me, this is too vague as far as the community input. So based on the other conversations that we've had in the past. So I'm fine with supporting the MOA. I'm not comfortable with the substitute motion. Mr. Watson.
Madam Chair, I mean a lot of respect when I say this. I think if you roll back the tape of what you just said, you just said, I want to hear from the community. I recommended a way to do that. And correct me if I'm wrong, if this isn't what you said. But at the same time, I'm not comfortable with this because it suggests that we get community input and we need to hear from our chief first. And you also said this is too vague. When I've tried to be specific in the past, you said it's too specific. So I'm I'm asking you, like,
So-
directly, so what's the,
So what I said the last meeting was that I feel like board members should have town halls. I feel like they should collect the information from their district, sit down with the decision makers and identify what the issues are and see what changes may need to come to an MOA.
so I think this is actually, it's actually telling the community, we're open to doing what you're suggesting. I mean, all this is saying is, we're gonna get community input.
Okay,
That's
but
it.
I'm not in favor of doing a big, huge process.
There's nothing in this that describes that. There's no specifics about how, and I did that very intentionally, because you could do it the way you want to do it, just like you said.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing in this that says, we're gonna
So-
do it X, Y, and Z way. All it says is, in good faith, we're gonna engage the community in conversations. And actually what it says is that the director of schools is going to decide how to do that.
So I guess my concern is that we were still looking at a big process.
Well, but we're not. We're putting the cart before the horse. The superintendent has not made a recommendation of how he would do that. He may come to the board and say, hey, board, I think it might be good for you to host meetings in your communities. I mean, there's been no conversation or expectation about how that process would happen.
Okay. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It doesn't even say conversation in here. It just says that we'll leverage community input, and that could be anything. That could be, it could be the public forum we already have. There's nothing here that says we're gonna do it one way or another. Something that confuses people in the community and also seems to confuse some of us is that we are elected in a representative election, but we are not elected just to take care of our community. Our duty is to the district. And if we are only serving our voting district, we are not serving our school district.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Any other comments? Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. Mr. Watson, I appreciate you taking the time to present this to us. I have a couple concerns. One is that it came to us so late at the meeting and why we weren't presented with this earlier. And then my concern is that, no one's talked to the sheriff, it seems like, on this. What is his input? What is his thoughts on this? Has he seen this? So why I agree with Ms. Christie that the expectations are there, that we're going to work on this, that this will be a process. My concern is that the other groups in this haven't been talked to about this specific substitute amendment.
Any feedback on that, Mr. Watson?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Henderson. So I kind of debated internally about that. I just had this idea, I think it was yesterday, Mr. Dupler, when I talked to you about making a substitute motion, and we even had a discussion about does it make sense, when does it make sense to send it out? I, in the end, didn't decide to send it out early because there's really nothing controversial in it. And the last time that I presented something to this board, I sent it quite a bit early, and was met with indifference about that in terms of how I did it and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to me when we as an elected body get into conversations about how individuals bring things to the board about whether or not we're going to support something or not. We're actually fairly limited as a body. We all know this about how we can bring things before this body. And we also know we're very limited about having individual conversations. Like, I can't sit down with you ahead of this meeting and say, hey, Ms. Henderson, what do you think about this? I think it's still important to get this type of thing done. Is that something you agree with? Is there a way that you would word this? We don't have those luxuries due to the law. And the superintendent, again, correct me wrong if I'm wrong, you said several times over the last couple of months that you have spoken to the sheriff, and the sheriff has been open to a new agreement. He just says, hey, I don't want you all to hire somebody to tell me what to do, correct? Is that basically what he has said?
Yes, sir, that's
Yeah,
correct.
so this again does not go against what the sheriff has said or anybody else like that, but it's also a little bit odd that we keep bringing those other entities up. We are the lead parent organization in this MOA. And by being the lead parent organization, it's up to us to take the first step. The sheriff will never come to us and say, and this isn't a negative statement about him as a person, he would never come to us and say, hey, I think we need to change the MOA. That's not the way that typically would work, is it would be us prompting it and saying, hey, we want to try to get to a better agreement than what we have. And this also does not tie the sheriff's hands. It doesn't tie the sheriff's hands or the chief's hands. We can't tell them they have to get into a new agreement. And this doesn't do this. All it does is empower the superintendent in good faith to go to those entities and say, we'd like to work toward one agreement. And if superintendent, he's pretty persuasive, and if he can get them to the table to do that, that's great. But if he can't, he can't. He can't, he's not able to. He can't twist anybody's arm. So, I brought this, I have tried to get this board to say one thing for 3 months, officially, that we want to hear from the community, to put it in writing. And for 3 months, I hear everybody on this board, we want to hear from the community, but when it comes time to making the decision and putting it on paper, well, how does this person feel about it? Or we didn't see this specific wording. There's nothing controversial in this wording. I didn't see this early enough. And again, Ms. Henderson, I'm expressing, I think, some of what Bob did in terms of my own spirit, real frustration, because I got on this body, not because of this issue. I was not even aware of this when I got on this body. But I got on this body to help this system be all that it can be. And I think that's why all of us did. But none of us can do anything by ourselves. We can't do anything by ourselves on this body. And all I'm looking for is a little bit of, hey, yep, we hear this is occurring. Multiple people on this board have expressed this as a concern. Nothing is controversial about this. I'm not expressing a specific way to do it. And I'm just saying, hey, can't we get to something better than what we have? And let's tell the community we're going to try to do that. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. And there's going to be times when you do the same thing with me, when you're going to say, hey, Mr. Watson, I know this may not be the issue that you care about the most, but I need your help getting it done because I can't get it done on my own. And that's what I'm asking for. And I think it's not about me. It's about sending the message to this community as a whole that when we say we want to hear from the community, we actually mean it. Because so many elected bodies, nobody who's an elected official is ever going to stand up and say, I don't want to hear from the community. It would be ridiculous, right? That would be absolutely stupid to do that. But the community hears all the time from elected officials who say they want something that they don't really want. And all I'm asking is, if you all really want that, if you really think it's important to bring the community to this issue, then goodness, vote for something that's not controversial and empower the superintendent to do his job when he says clearly to us he doesn't have direction on this issue. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield.
I'm glad you brought that, Daniel, because that's what I'm asking for, too. We don't have BAP here, so if it falls 4-4, it fails. We don't have healing in my community. So I'm asking for just a bone real quick, like just throw a vote to start the healing process. We're going to school in August, and the kids are going to be great. We have a great setup. We have great principals there. I have all faith that we will get back on track. But we're still grieving in District 1. And your vote will start the process of some type of healing process that we need in our community to move forward. And so thank you, Daniel, for what you've said. I don't know what's all playing in everyone's mind on decision-making. I don't know all the entities involved. But what I do know for my community and the Knox County as a whole, this shook up the whole city. We gotta heal. And it starts by hearing voices and hearing the story. So I just ask for somebody to just hear that from me.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I just want to speak to one specific point that you made, Mr. Watson, about us being the lead organization, because I've heard that before. And my perspective is a little bit differently because I see us more all as partners. While, yes, it is people coming into our schools, but maybe Mr. Oates or Mr. Thomas, you can speak to exactly how many officers are provided to us by the different departments. And it's my understanding that we are not paying these officers. This is coming out of their budgets, right? So it's not like we're holding all the cards here in that sense. I mean, we have to work together. I see it more as a partnership than it is as us being able to say, we have to have this, this, and this.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. I think that's an excellent point. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have really looked at this wording as analytically as I possibly can while we've been talking. And I'm trying to find the objectionable pieces, and I can't find them. It doesn't say the things that it sounds like from our conversation. There's nothing here to discuss prior to this vote. It says, with the expectation and authorization for the director of schools, not anybody else, but for the director of schools to work with the other named entities. If the other named entities don't want to, that's on them. That's not on us. With the expectation and authorization for the director of schools to work with the other named entities in the MOAs and combine them with the sheriff's office and the police department into one MOA. If they choose not to, they choose not to. If they work together and it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We're not voting on that. We're not voting on any of those pieces. We're voting on authorizing the director of schools to work with those other entities. There's nothing to discuss with them prior to that because we're authorizing the discussion. It doesn't make sense to have a discussion about having a discussion about having a discussion. All we're doing is authorizing the director of schools to work with the other named entities and to listen to people.
And Ms. Owen, if
there's nothing else here, I want everyone to really understand that whatever's read into this, I can't understand where that's coming from because it's not here, it's not in these words. If somebody can show that to me, if somebody can show me where it says in this that we're doing anything else, I'd be glad to look at it, but I can't find it.
Call for the question, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. So do we have a second on that? Oh, okay. Any discussion on calling for the question? Okay, all in favor? Mm-hmm. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote, Ms. Courtney.
This is a roll call vote on Mr. Watson's substitute motion. Does anyone want me to read that back into the record? The motion is to approve item 9B with the expectation and authorization for the director of schools to work with the other named entities in the MOAs to combine the separate MOAs with Knox County Sheriff's Office and Knoxville Police Department into one MOA, leveraging input from the community and other stakeholder groups, and present a proposed combined MOA for board approval within the next 12 months. Ms. Satterfield? Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Watson? Yes. Ms. Henderson? Ms. Bounds? No. Mr. McMillan? No. Ms. Christie? Ms. Horn?
No.
That's 4 yes votes and 4 no votes.
Okay. So we have 4 Yes, and so that fails. Okay. Mhm. Okay, do we have, can we go back to the original motion? Do we have a motion to approve 9B as it's presented on the agenda? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie. Do we have a second? We have a motion by Ms. Henderson. Discussion on 9B. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this point of discussion still has to do with 9B. So, Ms. Christie, I wanted to just address your comment about being the lead organization. I don't think that's being taken the way I intended. By saying the lead organization, I don't mean that we have all the cards. I mean, in any partnership, especially in an MOA. So, the organization that I run, the Restoration House, I have an MOA with the Knoxville Leadership Foundation. What I mean by being the lead is if our organization didn't exist, there would be no MOA. And that's what I mean by this agreement, is that if KCS did not exist, there would be no MOA between KPD and KCSO because there would be no need for it. And so all I mean by us being the lead is that we're the top stakeholder in it. Doesn't mean we control the cards, doesn't mean that it's for us to do. I will be passing on this, and I want to make it clear why I'm passing on it. It's not because I don't agree with the changes. I agree with the changes, but I'm passing on it because, again, we as a board have consistently said two things. We want to review the MOA. We want to get community input. I can't, in good faith, then go against that and approve an MOA that had no community input. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Satterfield?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Tom, this is for you, and feel completely okay to pass on the question that I'm going to ask. I just need clarity. Being that we did not vote to give you, to empower you to have to include community discussion, but also being that as board members, there's an expectation that the director of school does this, are you clear on what you need to do? And again, this is not a trick question. I'm not clear, and so I don't know if you are.
Well, based on the vote, obviously, I'm not authorized to do what is stated in the amendment. So I really don't know what to do, I guess. So.
I think that's evident, right? And that's the messages that we've been giving Superintendent Thomas for the last 3 months here, and he's been tied up from actually doing his job because his bosses are giving him two different messages. So I understand where you're coming from, Superintendent Thomas, on how to move forward, and I don't know when the new chief of security comes in, I hope he's able to do whatever he needs to do to get his plan in place. And whatever that looks like, I hope that none of us get in the way of the chief of security doing exactly what he needs to do to get his plan together. Because we've gotten in the way of Superintendent Thomas from doing his job, from my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. I think Ms. Christie was next.
Yeah, and that's why I made my original comment when this was presented, because, see, to me, this did bring an additional layer of confusion. I mean, in my mind, we pay and hire the superintendent to manage the district. And I don't feel like he needs my permission to do what we pay him to do. But see, when we put these forward and then vote on them, suddenly he does think he can't, or that there are restrictions there. And I guess that was my problem in the beginning with the wording, was that, it already was my expectation that he and the new security chief would have these discussions and move forward with it.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dupler, by not outwardly authorizing, we have also not deauthorized, correct?
That's correct, Ms. Owen. I think as we discussed earlier, that Mr. McMillan brought up, there can always be a discussion amongst the parties, but the parties would have to agree to make any changes.
So if Mr. Thomas so chose, he could enter into discussions. He could have, he could begin this process even though we have not authorized it. He would still be able to do that if he so chose.
He could, and the way that would be most appropriate in his administrative role and as the sole employee of the board would be if there were some issues that came up operationally and you've talked about a new security chief, then if that security chief feels like there's some things that need to be changed, then that would be probably the most obvious example of how that would come up.
Okay. So he could go ahead and have these discussions. He could go ahead and get input and then bring it to us without us specifically authorizing that. Thank you, Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. All I was going to say is what Ms. Owen said and what Mr. Dupler confirmed. There's nothing to prohibit the superintendent from meeting with the city mayor and our new chief and working out something. They could have the sheriff join them if they wish, but they do not have to until they have something that they could present to the sheriff and reach some kind of common ground. But I guess when you look at it, and this is not to belittle the mayor, but she's the wild card in the arrangement. The superintendent, our new chief, and the mayor have to agree on something before you would even think about going to the county and entering into an agreement. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Yeah, I agree with what other board members have said. My expectation is that the superintendent would be in conversation with all of these entities on our behalf, and this board doesn't need to micromanage the way he does that. And so that's my purpose for not supporting the original or the substitute motion, and so I think that, you know, that's what we expect for the superintendent to do, is to manage this type of process. So there's, as Ms. Owen said, there's nothing that would prohibit him from doing his job, what he needs to do, and that would be my expectation. So if we have no other comments, we'll vote on this MOA. And we can just do a roll call vote. Ms. Owen, I'm sorry. Not Ms. Owen, Ms. Cody.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Satterfield?
Pass.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Watson? Ms. Henderson? Ms. Bounds? Mr. McMillan? Ms. Christie? Ms. Horn?
Yes.
5 yes votes, 1 no vote, and 2 pass votes. Ms. Satterfield or Mr. Watson, do you want to change your? I'm sorry, it's 5 yes votes, 1 no vote, and 2 pass. So did either of the passes want to change their?
Okay, thank you. Motion carries.
Wait a minute. What were we voting on there?
Voting on whether we're accepting, excuse me. Order, please.
The original?
The original motion.
Well, somebody said something about the substitute.
Well, I just referenced the substitute, but I said that's why I didn't vote for the substitute.
So we're just voting on the original.
Correct.
9B?
Yes.
Okay. Can I change my vote to yes?
Fine by me.
It hadn't been announced.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll change it.
To yes.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's
Okay.
So that's 6 yes votes and 2 pass votes, Ms. Horn.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan, for that clarification. Okay, and then we'll go to the next agenda item.
approve scope of services for the medical director for Knox County Schools agreement to document the requirements and scope of services provided by the Knox County Public Health Officer for KCS.
We have a motion to approve. Okay, motion by Mr. Watson. Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Okay, and we have one public speaker for public forum, Kim Credich. State your name and county of residence, please.
I'd like to make a motion that we reconsider the previous motion.
Okay, we have a motion to reconsider the previous motion and a second. Discussion on that? They want to go back to the agreement with the health department because it failed for lack of a second. There was not a second. Okay, do we have discussion? Excuse me, Ms. Bounds.
I would like clarification from the law director, but it's my understanding Robert's rules, it cannot be brought back up in this meeting. Is that correct?
Well, so she's asked for a motion to reconsider, so, I mean, the motion to reconsider would have to be voted on first before you could do anything.
But, okay, I'm still not clear, so.
Okay. All right, so there was, I mean, it failed because there was no second, so that's why the motion failed. Because there has to be a second for it to be discussed. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that. I think we all understand that. I think what just happened was similar to what Mr. Mike just experienced, where there was a little bit of confusion at the end about exactly what was happening.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not wanting to speak from you all. Did you all intend not to discuss the? Okay, so that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I think there was some confusion at the end of the meeting.
Okay, so we'll vote on the motion that has been made to reconsider the item. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, okay, I think we want to do a roll call. Okay, let's do a roll call vote on that, please.
Ms. Satterfield, this is to reconsider the motion on item 6C3. Yes. Ms. Satterfield. Ms. Owen? Yes. Mr. Watson? Yes. Ms. Henderson? Ms. Bounds?
No.
Mr. McMillan? Ms. Christie? Ms. Horn?
No.
That's 3 yes votes and 5 no votes.
Okay, so motion fails. Okay, thank you. Okay, now, Ms. Credich, sorry. Thank you for your patience.
Sure.
I'm just waiting for the
Okay,
little time
yeah,
thing to go.
he's pulling the clock up. Okay, she's ready. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kim Credich. I reside in Knox County. I would like to talk to you about $114 million. I would like to talk about how you all plan to spend the ESSER funding. To me, it's like, I'll take any COVID silver lining I can take at this point, and this seems like a huge windfall that can be used for incredible progress in our county. I did go to the second public meeting for public input about how the funding could be used and might be used, and I thought it was an excellent presentation, and I have many ideas to help with the current situation and learning loss for students with disabilities. As I think a lot of you know, that's been my passion for the last 16 years that we've been in Knox County. And so I brought a visual, and this represents 2009, 2010, when one of our twin sons, who happens to have autism, was in 4th grade. He went to Sequoia, then Vine Middle Magnet, and then all our boys did, and West High School. So this is what his 4th grade work looked like. I've got binders and boxes of all of the modified work that he did all the way through. And I would like to propose that, since what I heard from that presentation were things like interventions, developing resources, especially for populations that are typically, that have disparities in outcomes, can be used. And I've researched it. There are a lot of possibilities. So I'm discouraged still that this board promised, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, Lynn Fugate promised that you all would have workshops on what special ed law and the requirements entailed. And since it is your board policy to follow the law, the federal and state law, I'm still discouraged that people on the board still don't seem to know what it entails. I think the recording issue for IEP meetings brought forth the lack of knowledge. People said they don't know what goes on in IEP meetings except for a few who had attended. And one of the big points that I would like you all to understand, and I looked up the LEA plan, and it says right here, for 2021, utilize the AAD standards and district-developed resources to support classroom instruction within general education environments. We have failed all of our targets for inclusion in the least restrictive environment every year since I can see data on the TDOE website, since 2012. And we keep failing improvement on our failures. And so I was very heartened to see that my friend Jason Myers is the person responsible for that. And that gives me a clue that you all are hopefully in it for the students with significant disabilities, because those are the students on the alternate academic diploma or alternate assessment standards. When I don't know if you all know the difference between a modification and accommodation, but what we're doing right now in Knox County, as far as I can tell for the last 16 years, is that we're doing it student by student by student. We don't have a modifications bank. This is 4th grade sitting in my basement, and I've got 3rd through 12th. And when a student is on modified content, where they're on the alternate assessment, or they just need modified work, and the IEP team decides whether they will earn a credit-bearing course based on how much it is modified. My own son got a special education diploma. He went to 4 years of the UT Future program. He lives independently with a little bit of support. And if you drive by Sunspot and notice the Sunspot restaurant and notice the umbrellas up, those yellow umbrellas, well, he's been putting them up for about 5 weeks now. So he's got gainful employment in his absolute future. So it was a success, but it takes this. If he did not have appropriately modified content, his behaviors would have been such that he would never have been able to be included. And that has been the biggest issue I have seen from parents, especially during COVID, when the parents were let into the classroom virtually, and they're like, my kid can't do that. No wonder they don't like school. So I know that's a lot of information out there, but I don't have time to give you a whole workshop because I've got 7 seconds left. But look at this and think about it, and please talk and ask what's possible with that ESSER funding. This is just one idea. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much to all our public speakers for coming to share your thoughts with us this evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you.